Hello and welcome to the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast with me, Errol Lawson. This is a place where Christian leaders and entrepreneurs are empowered to step into their greatness and fulfill their callings to the glory of God. If you're a professional, you're thinking, I want to start my own business. There's a business in me that's going to enlarge the kingdom of God and make a difference, and you're not sure how to get started? Go to www.errollawson.com now and download our free video on the 5 core abilities of highly effective Christian leaders. You're going to love today's episode. Hey, why don't you go back and check out our over 100 previous episodes and see which one meets your need for where you are right now in your leadership journey. Thank you for tuning in. Enjoy today's episode, and God bless you. Hello and welcome again to the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast with me, Errol Lawson, and my very special guest today, all the way from Atlanta, is Dr. Don Brawley III. Dr. Don is a leadership strategist who helps influencers reach their dreams faster. He's the founder and CEO of Influencers Global, a company committed to helping leaders increase their influence, income, and impact for God's kingdom. He, alongside his wife, Mona, are the founding pastors of Canaan Land Church International, a thriving ministry in suburban Atlanta, Georgia. Dr. Don, thank you for joining us today, sir.
Oh, I'm glad to be here, Errol. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Now, Dr. Don, before we go into our interview, just fill in any gaps, first of all, in your biography right there, and then give us a glimpse into what you're up to in the world right now.
All right. Well, I tell you what, one of the things that's not on there that I love for people to understand is the foundation. Really, what God started doing in my life started as a teenager. Mm-hmm. I gave my life over to Christ at 12, and by 16, God began to use me in ministry. I wasn't ordained yet, but I was being used to minister to people that were far older than me, mm-hmm. counsel couples that were married, speaking to people's lives. God used me in the prophetic. But at 17 years old, I knew that I was supposed to graduate high school a year earlier. And so I doubled up, and not knowing why, though, God just spoke to me and said, you're going to finish high school early. Mm. And long story short, it was because he had a plan for my life that I did not know of. And that plan included me getting married early. So I was married at 18 years old. Awesome. I was married to a young lady that I met in my walk with Christ, probably about 15 years old, and we became good friends. And not only were we good friends, but she eventually moved I'm from New York originally, so she moved to Atlanta, Georgia, and she went to Spelman University, a historically black university here in Atlanta. And long story short, God just sped things up in my life very quickly. And I'm saying that to say this to your listeners. This year we'll have made 29 years of marriage. And I believe that every leader that's going to do something for God has got to have the strength of a strong family behind them, and has got to have the house in order. Not only that, but the other thing is that it's never too early to start. Sometimes we put God inside of a box, and we think that he can only do this in my life at this age. And I'm living witness that at 18 years old, not only did we get married, but God gave us the grace to finish college, and to graduate college and walk hand in hand. I was 20 when I graduated with my bachelor's, and she was 21. And so God gave us the grace to do that. And, whenever God gives you a vision or a dream, he gives you the grace to do it. And you also need the people in your life that support you. So that's a big part of how I want to step into,
mm-hmm. We haven't got this on our question list, but what do you do when you're in leadership or you're in ministry and you're married and you feel like the marriage isn't flowing right? It's not helping. It's holding you down. The chemistry is not right. The communication's not happening, but you've got responsibility on your shoulders. Someone listening right now needs to hear. What do you do?
Yeah, you know what? I think you have to look at those signs. It's almost like when your body is in pain. The pain is not the issue. That's just a sign to tell you that something's not right, that something's not healthy in your body. Right. And if you don't stop and address it, the sickness is only going to get worse. And sometimes when it gets really bad, it becomes terminal. So what I would encourage people to do is to stop and say, wait a minute, there's something not operating right in my marriage. I need to stop now and figure out what that is and get it diagnosed. And so one of the ways that I would encourage people to do that is to find somebody else that's further along than you are that has a healthy, there are no perfect marriages, but somebody who has a healthy marriage, somebody who has some history, some perspective, who understands Christian values and viewpoint. And I would go as a couple, or it depends on the situation, but if you can, go as a couple. But if not, if you're the male, go find the brother in the relationship, or the female, go talk to that woman in that relationship and find out what are they doing to get the results that they have, and what are some things they can tell you to do to get those same results. The other thing I'm going to tell you is, in marriage, your spouse is never your problem. You know, people always say my spouse is my problem. The truth of the matter is your spouse only points out the problem that's in you. So when a person says, you know, she just, you know, hits that last nerve, or she just pushes my button, God is asking you, what is that button doing there to start with? Wow. She's just pointing to the button that's in you. So, you know, because a lot of folks, you know, Errol, they want to run into ministry and business, and that's great. But the fact of the matter is that there's character formation that God wants to do in us so he can maximize his use through us. Wow. And if we ignore these opportunities for growth, then we limit what God can do in our life in business. We limit what he can do in our life in ministry. And also we build on a foundation that's not going to withstand the long run when things really get tough and tight. Because in any leadership role, you're going to face pressure. And if we can't handle the pressure at home and we can't work through that, we're bound to collapse under the pressure, you know, in ministry or in the marketplace.
I can tell this is going to be a great conversation today, you know. I know when we met briefly when you were in the UK a few months back, and you said a little bit about Influencers Global that you're running right now. And of course, you pastor at Canaan Land Church. Just give us a bit of the backstory as to how you kind of stepped into those offices, if you like. How did you know that God, although you knew you were called to ministry of some level, how did you know that God had told you to do those things?
Wow. It really has been a journey. I had no clue. I really didn't know I was called to pastor. You know, as a young man, I had no clue. That was not on my radar at all. But early in my 20s, we started a Bible study. This is back during the Gulf War, when in Iraq with the United States in like 1991. Started a Bible study in our home in New York. It lasted for about 9 months. In that 9-month period, word came from the Lord that a church would come out of it. So people were looking for a church to start then and there, and we were getting ready to go move forward with it. And the Holy Spirit said, it is not time. You are not ready. Go submit yourself under somebody else. And we literally stopped that Bible study after 9 months. People were upset. They were mad because they thought this is what God said we were supposed to start it. Long story short, we sat under a pastor out of New York for about 3.5 years. And during that time period, God began to speak to me that I've called you the pastor. But it's not here in New York. It's in a city. And as I said it out of my mouth, the Spirit of God said Atlanta, a place that I'd only visited one time in my life, 900 miles from my home in New York. And he called us down to Atlanta. So the truth of the matter was we came down by faith. We knew nobody in the city of Atlanta. We had no family, no friends, no job, no network, nothing. You know, it was one of the biggest decisions that we made. But this is what I will tell you. As we moved toward Atlanta, a year later, we got to Atlanta. Every time we took a step in faith, God met us along the way. And I want you to kind of picture, your listeners to sort of picture God telling Abraham to go sacrifice Isaac. And when he gets to that place that he's going to sacrifice, all of a sudden there is a ram in the thicket. What I found out is this, that I believe that ram moved every time Abraham took a step toward the place God called him to go, even though he didn't understand all that it meant. As he moved in that direction, that ram moved in position to be in place when he got there. And that's what we discovered. When we got here to Atlanta in 1994, we had one child. My wife was pregnant with our daughter. And we planned to. We moved into our home. We purchased a home on a Friday. It was our first house ever that we owned. And a week later on a Sunday, we had 8 chairs we purchased from the store, 8 folding chairs in our den. And we just started inviting people. And out of that came the church that we pastor now. That's well over 500 people 22 years later. But what I found out is this. God doesn't guide parked cars. You know, he's not going to give you direction if you're not moving.
Right.
So when you start moving in faith, he starts giving you the direction. Well, in my journey in pastoring, I found out everything that I did not know about pastoring, everything that I did not know about growing people, did not know about church planting, making that step actually began to reveal the things that I was lacking. And so we had the word. I think we had that part down pat. We, those things we had. We knew how to have church, as they say here in the States. We had church. We knew how to do that part. What we did not know was really how to make disciples. And one of the things that I found out, and I strongly believe, is that discipleship and leadership are synonyms. Now, this is huge. Discipleship and leadership are synonyms. When you look at the 12 disciples, they were the 12 leaders that Jesus chose. And they would be the ones to lay the foundation, and they would be the ones to take the gospel on to the next generation. And, of course, we're here because of what they laid down. And so when I realized that, I got to a point, one of the things that hit me, this is I came to a crisis in ministry. And I think a lot of pastors that are on your podcast will be able to identify this. I came to a point after 3 years where I was completely burned out, discouraged, tired. And normally when I got to those places, and I had been there more than once, my wife was very encouraging. And if she got to that place, I was encouraging. Well, this one particular time, we were both in the same place at the same time. And we had talked ourselves right out of the church we were pastoring. And literally, it was October 1997. The first Sunday, I got up and said, we love you guys. We're grateful for this opportunity to have pastored you. We know God's going to do some great things in your life, but we are resigning effective the end of this month. But we're committed to finding you a local church where you can become members and grow. And a brother who was not even a member of our church, he was playing the keyboard for us. He was a member of Bishop Eddie Long's New Birth Church back then. He came up and said, "I refuse to accept your resignation." And literally right there in the service, he prayed. He prayed. I thought, how are you going to say that to me? You ain't even a member. But he came up and he embraced us and he prayed for us. And the leaders surrounded us and they joined and said we will not accept it. And what I discovered that day was I could continue on in ministry. I just could not continue on doing it myself. And so all along we have been doing it ourselves, covering all the bases ourselves, doing it. Instead of empowering people, instead of developing people, instead of releasing people, we had done everything ourselves. And that was a pivot, because from that point forward, I began to invest in my leaders, the leaders in our church. And I found out that we had leaders. They just came as raw materials. They were not pre-cooked. A lot of times we're looking for people to come into our churches or organizations already ready. They were leaders. They were just in raw form. And it was my job, I found out, to develop them and to disciple them and to empower them. And so we took about 3 years straight, just committing just to that, not trying to grow the church, not trying to be everything to everybody, just literally developing our leaders, pouring into them, meeting regularly, going through books, doing talks, all kinds of things, exposing them to other leaders, taking them to conferences and seminars, getting involved in their lives, what was important to them, creating a shared vision. And I'm telling you what, that changed my life. And from that point onward, that was, to get you to influencers, that took me to, wait a minute, if this is what I got, and I'm going to say this to you, this is without really having anybody pouring into me. I said, well, I could be a whole lot further if I had somebody to pour into me. But I struggled to find that person. And I know that's like, I had a prophetic call on my teens. I didn't have a mentor. As a pastor in my 20s, I didn't have someone that was consistently there. The people that were covering were too busy. So long story short, I wound up going back to school. And so you asked about my biography, if there's anything that's missing. Well, in 2002, I went back to study leadership at Regent University here in the United States, organization leadership. I got my master's in that. And I began to learn even more about, wow, if you had known this 10 years prior or 8 years prior, how much further could you have been? And so as I began to finish that program, I said, wait a minute, I've gotten so much now. Our church is healthy. Our leaders are healthy. We're making impact. We're seeing growth. Lives are being changed. The burden has been lifted off of me. I began to think about all the pastors that I knew that were struggling, that didn't know what they didn't know.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay. They didn't know what they didn't know. And but if they had somebody else to come alongside of them and that could speak into them and that could show them, then they would be able to experience what I experienced. And so long story short, I wound up going back and getting my doctorate in strategic leadership. And so since 2007, Formerly, I had been doing consulting prior and things of that nature and coaching. But since 2007, I started my company, which is Influencers Global, which goes in, and I walk alongside. I've worked in the business sector. I've worked in the church sector predominantly, but goes in and works with organizations that are struggling with seeing their vision happen, and works with pastors who are struggling from burnout, struggling in their families. Things are out of whack. They're not healthy at home. The church is not healthy. To get them healthy so they can make the kind of kingdom impact.
Are you seriously fired up about growing as a leader in business or church-based ministry? Are you feeling somewhat frustrated about not having realized your full potential in what you've been called to do? Could you do with someone to help you get some extra clarity or to be a sounding board for your plans and ideas? Great athletes have coaches, so do great leaders. The right leadership coach for you will result in an increased sense of clarity, direction, and purpose, dramatically increasing the results you achieve. If you're ready to step up, contact Errol to book a free, no-obligation introductory coaching session and see whether Errol is the right coach for you. Errol takes the lessons learned from his own leadership journey and from his extensive research to help leaders and entrepreneurs to step into their biggest challenges and rise to their next level. Email admin@errollawson.com right now to schedule your call.
As you're going around and you're meeting these leaders and going to these organizations, what's the biggest challenge that you're faced with or you're confronted with?
That I'm seeing with them, or me personally?
With them, first of all, with them.
Yeah, I would say with them, a biggest thing is that unfortunately, most leaders don't see their own need. That change actually begins with you. You know, I think going into it, a lot of times in leadership, people have this tendency to believe that everybody else around them has to change. But almost always in every organization I go to, change almost always begins with the leader. I will say that corporate America sort of gets this in a good and bad way. So in corporate America, when you go there, they will, if the leader doesn't produce the return on investment that they're looking for the company, then they will get rid of that leader because they recognize that company can't go any further than that leader. Yeah. It's the same thing in the church. You know, the thing is, though, we don't want to throw anybody out the church, and that's not our job, and I don't see that happening. But the irony is, though, that the leaders in the body, kingdom leaders, have got to realize that if you really want to see the vision God gave you come to pass, part of that vision includes your own personal transformation. And I'm going to tell you, any vision that doesn't transform you in the process is probably not a vision from God. Wow. God is far more concerned about you than he is about the vision. And part of that vision coming to pass is your transformation. And I think a good example of that would be Joseph. You could have a great dream, but if you're not being transformed in the journey to seeing that dream become reality, then you have to ask, is God actually the one who gave me that vision? And so when I get to the leaders, they quickly find out, and we kind of go and diagnose and do some things to assess where the organization is. And more than not, the leaders realize, and I thank God for the humble pastors that I've had the opportunity and the honor to serve, they realize, wow, there's some change that's happened, and I'm part of that change, you know. And it's not about trying to change everybody else first. It's about, one of the things I tell folks that I learned, it's about, I can't try to change anybody else, but when I change, everybody else that I work with has to change how they interact with me. So just as I'm being transformed and changed, it changes the interactions that I have with everybody, from my family to the church to in business. All those things change because I'm being, changed in the process as well. Brilliant. So that's one of the biggest things. Yeah.
Brilliant. And what about yourself? What's been your biggest challenge in your journey so far?
Oh my gosh, that was probably the first part. The first part for me was coming down thinking, so here in the United States, the country is sort of divided by regions. So I was a northerner with a northern mentality coming to the South region, trying to change everybody else to be like my version of church, my version of what I was familiar with. And I didn't realize that God didn't bring me here so much initially to change them. I had to be changed in order to reach them to connect with them and to lead them. So that was the biggest thing. The second thing that I dealt with was, and this was part of the whole breaking, if you will, and rebuilding process, was that need, as I talked to you earlier, feeling I had to do everything, not realizing that I needed to delegate and to trust people. And even if people failed, that it was okay, that they had an opportunity to fail at something, that they could learn from it, rather than me trying to do everything myself. It's almost like that Moses and Jethro kind of thing. You're going to burn away. You're going to waste away, wear down, trying to do everything. And so I try to do everything. I mean, I can tell you that when we first started. Mm-hmm.
Let me dig in a little bit into that thing about change, right? I think that's such a big deal. The process of change. Someone's listening is thinking like, okay, like how do I change? Or, what do you mean by change? What should I be doing? Do I go to bed earlier? Do I read more books? Like, could you break down like that? Someone's got a vision or a dream and that they haven't yet realized that it's about them.
Yeah, well, one of the things that I really believe is huge for any leader, the first thing is self-leadership. So I can't lead anybody else till I learn to lead myself. So I need to be able to first model the way. So whatever it is that I'm asking anybody else to do, I got to be that model. Right. That's the first thing. The second thing I have to be able to do is to enable others to act. I've got to be able to give power away. So if I struggle with that, giving authority or decision-making power away, if I have to be the one who decides, for instance, if I'm a pastor, I have to decide what the worship team is wearing this Sunday, then that's probably a problem if I'm not on the worship team. Right. That's probably a decision that they might need. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. But if I struggle with that, that's an area I need to change in. I need to be able to give decision-making power away to empower other people. I need to also be able to challenge the process, meaning, are we living out of status quo? If I'm doing what I've always done, I'm going to get the results that I've always gotten. So where along the way does the process need to be challenged? In other words, if I'm getting, C-level results and I want to get A-level results, what are the things that we're doing now that need to be done differently? Now, every time you answer one of those questions, it's going to hit on something for the leader. The leader's going to recognize, but I like it that way. Sure. Or this is the way we always did it. Or that's how I'm used.
Hello?
Okay. Yes. So I was saying that one of the things that I had to change, I'll give an example. I was very strong in the prophetic gift. So when I first started pastoring, that's my comfort zone. So I stayed operating under the prophetic. But that did not help grow disciples. I needed to operate more under the pastoral gift. That was a challenge for me. But I recognized after much travail and after much fruitlessness that in order for the church to be healthy, I was going to have to get out of my strength, which was the prophetic, and move more to a pastoral role and really learn how to shepherd the people, which was not as strong of a gifting or as developed at that time in my life. So those are the things. When you're seeing walls, you have to ask yourself, what is that wall? And what is that wall there to teach me? And what do I have to do different to get around that wall?
Brilliant.
Brilliant. Is what I'm doing adding to the wall and making it harder for me to get to my vision and what God is saying? Or is there another way I can challenge what I'm doing that I can get around it, that I can see the outcome that I actually want to see?
Awesome. Dr. Don, as we've been doing these interviews over the last 18 months or so, we found that there are 5 core abilities that highly effective Christian leaders and entrepreneurs have. We call this the 5 core abilities section. I'm going to ask you about them now. So the first ability is the ability to create and communicate a compelling vision. How have you been able to create and communicate your vision for your business or for your ministry? How do you go about it? What's your process?
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to tell you what not to do, which is what I did, which is by default, you kind of cut and paste. You see somebody else do a little something over here and this over there. So the first thing I'm going to say is don't do that. But I did that. And so I had to go backwards and I had to realize, first of all, what about this thing that I say is my vision is actually not authentically me. So I actually asked the question, what are you doing right now that's not authentically you? That's the first thing. So get rid of this stuff that's not authentically you, that's not your personal DNA. And then I had to discover who we were as a church, who we were and who we weren't, and then discard those other things. The other thing that I did was once I recognized that, I said, okay, in a perfect world, based on the DNA that God has given us, based on the passion, based on the strength that we have, in a perfect world, 10 years from now, write out exactly or describe exactly what you would look like 10 years from now if you could be maximized, if your DNA could be maximized 10 years from now, what would that look like? So we wrote a dream statement. We dream of a church where, and we didn't list like we dream of a church that has 5,000 people. I'm sorry?
Who's we?
We being the membership and the leadership of our church. Okay. We dream about specific ministry.
Sure.
So it dealt with dreaming in terms of what could be possible if we stay in our lane, if we stay authentic to who God made us, if we build on the strengths that God has given to us, if we resolve the weaknesses that we have around us or inside of our organization, where could we be in 10 years? What do we dream of? What would it take God to do by faith, but yet we have the raw materials because he's already given to us? So we wrote a dream statement that described us not so much quantitatively, but qualitatively, the type of church we wanted to be, an authentic church, for instance, a church that lives were transformed, that communities, that we did community transformation, where families were reunited, where the local school test scores actually went up because we were there. We asked those hard questions like, well, if our church closed its doors tomorrow, would anybody miss us? And that's a question we had to wrestle with. Would it even matter to the community if we weren't there any longer? And so we started answering those kinds of questions. So I would take my leadership to answer your question. I took my leadership. We wrote out a dream statement looking at some of those kinds of questions. And once we got that dream statement, we began to communicate it back to the overall church congregation. Right. We put it up in writing. We put it on our website. We have a thing called Dream Sunday every fifth Sunday during the year where we stop and we say our dream out loud. We call it Dreaming Out Loud, DOL, Dreaming Out Loud. Yeah. And we actually read the dream together. We actually have people come and testify whose lives have been transformed by that dream. We celebrate the dream when we see it, when we see people that have been transformed, when we see people serving the way our dream talks about, when we see lost souls being baptized for Jesus, we go back and we refer, this is our dream. This is what we prayed about. This is what we believe God about. So we celebrate it together. And then we practice what we call the Nehemiah Principle. The Nehemiah Principle is real simple. On day 28, the people wanted to give up building a wall. On day 52, the wall was completed. So halfway through, they wanted to give up halfway through seeing the vision. A lot of leaders are the same way. Yeah. So what we believe in the Nehemiah Principle is real simple. The vision must be stated every 30 days in order to keep people motivated from giving up. So we just state that vision monthly. We keep it in front of them, and we give it away. We give the vision away. We want the people. I used to have this thing. This is another thing. I could write a book on all the stuff not to do, but I had this thing I used to say when I first started pastoring: my vision, my vision, my vision. And as long as I said that, you know what? It was my vision. I was responsible to make it all happen. I no longer use that terminology. It's not my vision. It's our vision. It's a vision God has given us. It's what we're called to do. Those that God has brought to our church, we're called to do this together. And so we really press having a shared vision,
Praise God. That's so inspiring, I tell you, on so many levels. Let me go to our next question. So the second core ability is about finance. It's our ability to create and manage wealth. What we recognize is that most successful or effective Christian leaders are able to do it really well. How did you make your first dollar in ministry, or how does your ministry generate income?
Wow. I tell you what, Errol, in the 21st century, you got to be so creative. Things are not what they were. I'm a product of the 80s in terms of Christianity. I will tell you, when I started in ministry, the first thing, and we just did, is just ask people to give, and many who came in were already Christians, and several of them believed in tithing and that kind of thing. And so we started with the base of our ministry that believed in tithing. However, as the church got larger, less and less people were already Christians. Fewer people practiced tithing, and really didn't understand the whole concept of giving. So one of the things we had to do, number one, is to teach on biblical giving. That's the first thing we had to do, teach on it. But in terms of really 21st century, if you will, for lack of a better way of saying it, fundraising or funding your vision, we began to move in a couple of different dimensions. Number one, I'm a firm believer that vision attracts resources. Vision attracts provision. And so I'll just give you a quick story. Back when the Great Recession hit the United States in 2008 and went, straight into 2009, our highest giving year to that point was actually 2009. We actually raised more money during the recession that year than any other year when people were struggling. Wow. And the reason being was we had a vision that started from the people that we went over regularly. We let the people know that we recognized that there was a recession, but we're not participating in it. And so they began just to give to the vision. I mean, we were going through a building program during that time that was on halt. Even though we couldn't physically build at that time, folks were still giving as if the building was going up in the next day. And our giving went out of the roof. So I think one of the biggest things pastors have to do is make sure that vision is clear, make sure that people know what they're giving to, make sure that there's no confusion, because a lot of folks think, when they give into the church, that they're giving to the pastor, and they look at what the pastor's driving or the pastor, this, at least here in the States. I think if you have that kind of gap between how the pastor lives and how the congregation lives, people are going to give less. If the pastor is driving, a Bentley, and the people are taking a city bus, that's a problem. I think you need to be living somewhere relative to the people that you're serving. Otherwise, you bring into question who the money is actually going to. And there's some changes that, some people make a lot of money outside in business and have other streams of income. But my point is, you always want to make sure that people are not, that people trust the organization that they're giving to, whether it's sacred or secular. If they don't trust, they're not going to give to it. They're not going to support it.
Awesome. And the third ability is around productivity, and it's our ability to focus on the key things and delegate or eliminate the other things. Is there a process that you have or an activity that you engage in that helps you to focus and increase your productivity?
Yeah, there's the process that I really do, honestly. I actually do the whole SWOT analysis. For those of your listeners that may not be familiar with it, we look at, and we do this every couple of years. It used to be you could do it every 5 or 10 years. Now it's really every couple of years because the change is so quick. But SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats that exist. So the strengths and weaknesses, the most important part is we look at our organization inside. What is the strength and the weakness inside of our organization? And then the opportunities and threats outside. And the biggest reason why we go through that is because frequently is because the opportunities and the threats outside are changing so vastly. And I'll use it as an example for you guys in the UK. You guys went through Brexit in 2016. Well, that created some new threats for some people, but it also created plenty of opportunities. Here in the United States, we went through the surprise winning of President Donald Trump, and that was a surprise to people, just as the Brexit vote was a surprise to people. And that shifted some things outside the organization, whether you're sacred or secular. It created threats, but it also creates opportunities. Sure. And what I discovered is a lot of times we're looking at the threats and we miss the opportunities that have been created. So we do that regularly. The other thing that I use personally, really very often, sometimes on a daily basis, weekly basis, is something so simple, but a whiteboard. When I write out on the whiteboard, our core processes, whether I'm looking at my company or our church, what is it that we're in the business of doing? What is our year goal or objective? And then what are the benchmarks we need to be making each quarter to actually write that out and then bring my team in, and we get chart paper up and we use different colors and start saying, well, where are we in relation to this? And how can we do this better? And we actually look at the big picture. We stop, we step back, literally the big picture. We stop, we step back, and we look at it and we dissect it, and we come back and say, how can we do this better? And how can we do this smarter and more efficiently and effectively?
You know, I want to just touch on that because our fourth thing is around team and the importance of team. And when it comes to building a team for your project or for a business, how do you go about doing that? What's your process? What works best for you?
Yeah, that's
and
really,
what hasn't worked so well?
Yeah, oh gosh. Woo. Let me tell you what hasn't worked. What hasn't worked is two things. One is saying, I need a volunteer to do this. Because whenever you ask for a volunteer, two things happen. One, the people that need to be doing it don't volunteer. And the ones that are not gifted or skilled to do it will volunteer. Or you get no one at all that volunteers. So when it becomes things that require a certain skill level, asking for volunteers is something I do not do.
Right.
What does work is starting with not what needs to be done, but who needs to do it. So I start with the who, not the what, and I look at that. It's okay, who is the person that can make this happen? And once I make a short list, I look at my top person and I say, okay, I'm going to start with this person here. I personally will take that person out to lunch. They actually have a joke about me, quite frankly. They say, how did you start in doing A, B, and C? And they say, yes, he took me out to lunch too. It started with me taking the person out to lunch and just talking and connecting with them on a deeper level, finding out where they were before I just spring something on them. What's going on in your life? And then I tell them, okay, well, listen, this is what I see that I have, and I want to present this opportunity in front of you. And here's the reason why I think you would make a great person to lead this initiative. And I say, and I explain to them what's going to be required. And I say, what I'd like for you to do is pray about it. And I'd like you to let me know within 7 days what you believe God is saying for you in relation to you doing this. And I tell you, without fail, they come back to me 9 out of 10 times saying, you know what? It sounds like it's a lot, but I'm up for the challenge. I have a release in my heart to do it. And then we start together. We look and say, okay, in order to get this task from here to there, who are the kind of people you need on your team? So then my job is not to build the team. My job is to walk with that leader in building his or her team. And so instead of me becoming the bottleneck trying to head up 15 teams, I now am working to empower a leader who now develops his or her team.
Awesome.
And then gets them into place. So that has really worked. I have to honestly, that has really worked beautifully for us and has been a burden reliever, not only a burden reliever for myself, but a joy, because this is where you realize that my job as a leader is not to get more followers. My job as a leader is to make more leaders. And so every time I do that and I put somebody into a place that stretches them a little bit, they without fail come back to me and thank me for the opportunity. And they'll come back when I'm in the church setting and say, man, what I've done in the ministry here at our church has helped me so much better in my professional life. And these are faculty, instructors, professors at colleges, people work in the banking industry, people work in marketing. I mean, human resources, engineers will come back to me and say, I have grown more by working in this capacity in the church than I have in my years working in the marketplace. You've developed more of a leader in it. So it really is an amazing process when people know that you believe in them and that you're going to walk alongside them to develop them as they take a stretch in faith and take on a new task or project.
And the fifth ability is it's about confidence and unwavering determination. What's your key to building that confidence and that resilience and not getting stuck in the trap of the imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, when it comes to whether ministry or marketplace, particularly ministry, let me start with that one. You got to know that you're called. There are many times now, it's 20-something years, many times that I could have taken the easy road. I could be making way more money, doing other things outside of ministry with the gifts that I have, and I could have gone different directions versus working with a lot of churches and things. But it's a calling. That's the first thing. The second thing is, one of the things you I can say in hindsight, now that, it's been 20-something years that I've been doing this, when you recognize that you don't have the grace to be anybody else but you, it's, number one, it's humbling, and number two, it's painful. I've already walked that course where I tried to be, not even realizing it at the time, but I was trying to be like, and I could just fill the blanks in with different people that were whether high profile that you guys would know there or people that I know here. And I realized I didn't have the grace to be anybody else except who God had called me to be. And so I've learned to appreciate my strengths and just stay in my lane. I don't have every gift, I don't have every talent, and I don't have the anointing and the grace to be other people. But the biggest thing I could say to anybody else is literally stay in your lane and appreciate the gifts that God has given you. Meaning, when I say appreciate, put value on it. Put value on it, and recognize that God will bring other people that you will compliment what they have. They'll compliment what you have, but it's not for you to try to be like anybody else. You won't even have any joy, because when I tried that, I had no joy at all.
Awesome.
No joy, burned out, tired out, wore out. But I have so much joy just being authentically myself and thanking God for all that I am. And like Paul says, you know what? He says, whatever I am and whatever I'm not is by the grace of God. So you have to be able to thank God for all that you are and all that you're not, because it's all by the grace of God anyway.
Amen. And this is a quick fire round now, right? So here we go.
All right.
What does the first 90 minutes of your day look like? John Maxwell said that the secrets to your success are hidden in your daily routine. What are your first 90 minutes like?
He's right. I tell you, when I get up, first things I do, it has a lot to do with exercise. I'm exercising my spirit man in prayer, and I'm exercising my body. So I'm going to pray, I'm going to reflect, I'm going to journal, and I'm going to exercise. So you might catch me usually on a good day. I'll be doing 3 miles walking outside, and I just having an awesome time connecting with God in that time as well, and praying and reflecting.
Awesome. And what are the key habits that have contributed towards your success?
Wow. Asking for feedback regularly from those that walk with me. I don't want to have the yes man syndrome and be blinded, so I ask for feedback regularly. As I said, I journal daily, and a quiet time with God and with yourself, where you can actually hear your own thoughts and get them out of your mind and evaluate what you're thinking. Brilliant. And make the right decisions.
Brilliant. And what's your biggest weakness as a leader?
Biggest weakness by far is probably taking on too much at one time, not scheduling in a more smarter way, and often sometimes even not asking for as much help as I could. So actually, those are right on my list this year, things that I'm working diligently to come out of, and have some people holding me accountable, actually, that I do a better job personally with that.
And what's the biggest strength as a leader?
Wow, biggest strength, being adaptable, that I'm flexible, willing to change. If something needs to be changed personally, organizationally, just being able to be adaptable and being able to relate to people because of that, being adaptable and flexible.
That's great. And then, who have been your top 3 most significant mentors in your leadership journey so far?
I'm going to start from a long time ago. My former pastor out of New York, Randy Brown, helped me to have a global perspective. So he was a church planter in Africa as a young man. And years later, I was able to go back overseas and plant churches in Africa and just see the world from a more global perspective. I would say Dr. Sam Chan. He is an amazing friend and mentor as well. One thing I love about Dr. Chan, he has the ability to connect with people and relate to pastors particularly in a way that very few people can. And he taught me really how to relate better to the people that I serve, my peers, and actually even people that are in front of me, how to make those types of deeper connections with them. And so I particularly have a great appreciation for him, as well as Bishop Delcy Brown. He's here in Atlanta. He's a global statesman as well. He is a businessman. His dad was a multimillionaire in the 1950s. He started a hair company called Bronner Brothers. And so he blesses me because on both sides, he understands the world of business. And he also has a mega church here. And really, he's shown me that you don't have to wrestle between serving God and money. You can have both, but you just have to choose which one is going to be which one you're going to serve. And so I just watch how he handles with grace and dignity, no matter which role he's in as a businessman, but even more so as a man of God, as a bishop, that he walks faithfully before the Lord. He's got a strong family life.
Let me dig a bit deeper into those three relationships. What's been the best single piece of advice each of those three people have given you?
Wow. That's a good one. Randy Brown told me, he said, don't let, now this is when I was 22 going over to Africa with him, just having had my first child. He said, one of the things he said is never measure your maturity by your age. Your age is not your spiritual maturity. You're far more mature spiritually than you are by your age. So don't ever let that stop you. So he helped me to recognize, don't put a limitation or cap on what you can do at a young age. And so that got me started in a lot of things at a very early age. Sam Chan blessed me. There was something I was going to present to a leader right here. I won't mention the name, but if I said, all your audience would know, secular and sacred would know this person. And he looked at me and he said, why are you going to do that? He said, why don't you just do it yourself? And one of the things that he taught me way back, this was years ago, just believe in yourself. Sometimes we look to other people to do certain things, but why don't you do it yourself? And he's always been that kind of person to say, you've got it in you. I believe in you. And so I think we all need, I don't care how far you've been doing something or how long you've been doing something, you need people that you respect and, admire to actually say, I believe in you. And that's what he did for me. He shows me. Dale Bronner, Bishop Dale C. Bronner is absolutely amazing. I think the biggest lesson he taught me was that as a leader, you should want the people that are around you to go further than you've gone. Not just say it, but you should genuinely want it, and that you should have enough in you that you could celebrate their success, and that you could not only just celebrate, but push them to go further than you. And that's one of the things about him. His thing is, you know what? If all of you that are connected to me go past wherever I go, I will be more than happy to see that and celebrate that. And he lives his life like that. And so to have that kind of unselfishness in the body of Christ, I hate to say it's a rarity to that level. And but it taught me that there are people like that, and that that's what my aim is, to want those, whether I serve them outside of our church or in the marketplace or in our church. I want their destiny to be realized in their life. Awesome. And as a leader, that's actually now my joy when I see it.
Awesome. We're almost done. And what's the one thing you're most fired up about right now?
Woo, Jesus. The one thing I'm more fired up about the church being the church, because I'm telling you what, in the 21st century, the devil's trying to say that the church is useless, that we're outdated, that the scriptures are a fable, that the next generation is leaving the church, that we are irrelevant, that, that we're dying out. But I'm more fired up about the church rising up, being the church, that we have the answer to every problem on earth is in the Word of God and is in the kingdom of God. And I'm fired up about seeing people being moving, as you and I talked about offline, moving outside of the four walls and being the church. One of the things that I told people, we're going to get T-shirts that say, the church has left the building. Because when we understand the church is not the building, but it's the people that God is building, we can go out and really be kingdom citizens that change the world. It doesn't matter if you're in the marketplace, then that's your assignment in the marketplace, to be a world changer. If you're in the sacred area, you're a world changer. But God is looking for people that are going to rise up and speak up, because the truth of the matter is we are his hands and his feet. And I think for so many years, we've only been his mouth. And it's time for the church now to be the hands and feet of Jesus on the earth.
Completely agree with you on that, man. And lastly, is there a book or a resource you'd recommend for a leader or entrepreneur that's listening right now?
Absolutely. There's a book that I just got finished reading, and when I tell you, it will bless your listeners, it will bless their life, and they will look back decades from now saying, I'm so glad I read this book. It's a wonderful book that you would love as well, called Living Forward. Living Forward is by Michael Hyatt and Daniel Harkavy. And what the book does is it talks about life planning and making sure that your life is really healthy in the things that are important. So a lot of times what I have found out with businessmen, they're successful in business, but they're failing in their marriages. You know, I found out some folks are successful with their children, but they're failing in their businesses. They don't, to balance all those things out. So this book really helps leaders look at the kind of life and legacy they want to have, and move forward to live intentionally, and make sure that all the various priorities or things that we say that are priority, people that are priority to us, get the adequate attention in our life. And then when we look back at our life, we can look back with a sense of joy and not regret.
Dr. Don, thank you so much for such a rich, valuable time today. It's been really, really inspiring on so many different levels.
Good.
How do our listeners find out more about you? Where do they go? Are you on social media? Do you have a website? Can you give us those handles?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time with you guys today. And with your listeners, you can follow me at all things at Don Brawley. That's D-O-N, capital D-O-N, B as in boy, R-A-W-L-E-Y. The other thing I would encourage your listeners to do, you can also visit donbrawley.com, but also I want to give them something. It's called, we do a little thing we call Motivation Monday. And if they visit influencers with an S, influencers motivationmonday.com, influencers motivation Monday, not only will they get in their inbox a little snippet every week from myself that speaks specifically to kingdom people that are in the marketplace or in ministry, every week that'll come to the inbox of the video. I'm also willing to send them a teaching that we did at our Influencers Global Conference, which was the first of its kind, a virtual 100% online conference with over 200 people from 3 different continents over a 7-day period, featuring Bishop Delcy Bronner and Sam Chan and Tudor Bismarck and Pastor Sunday out of Ukraine and many, many others. But I want to give them a presentation called Maximizing Your Leadership Capacity. And that one is by Bishop Delcy Bronner. I think every one of your listeners will be blessed by that and will be stretched by that, because the greater their capacity is, the more they can contain, the more vision they can contain, the more vision they can attain.
Awesome.
So if they sign up for Motivation Monday,
where should they go for that? They should go to www.influencers.
They should go to influencersmotivationmonday.com and let me know when this airs, and then we'll make sure that the people who sign up from you get that teaching.
So we're going to have that in the show notes for you guys. All right. So just go to the show notes on the webpage, or if you're on iTunes listening now, in the show notes, you'll find the website link. Go and click right there and go follow, listen in, tune in to whatever Dr. Don's up to in the world. Be inspired, be lifted. God bless you as you've been listening today. Dr. Don, thank you for your time today, sir.
Thank you, Errol. It's my pleasure, and blessings to the Rising Generation Leadership Broadcast. You're doing some great things, sir, and we're proud of you.
Thank you. God bless you, sir. Thank you again for joining us today on the Rising Generation Leadership Podcast. I pray you've been inspired, you've been lifted, you've been encouraged to take your personal leadership to the next level. We really encourage you guys to just take action, make it happen, do something, start somewhere, go out and change the world in some way, big or small. Guys, if you've enjoyed the podcast today, please share with your friends, share with your loved ones, your colleagues, someone out there you think might benefit from hearing this great content. And if you want some more questions answering, you got a question, email me, Errol@errollawson.com. Or if you want a free 30 to 45 minute coaching session with myself around a leadership challenge or issue you're working on in your business, your church, or in your organization, please feel free to email me right away. We'll get you booked in. It's Errol@errollawson.com. Thank you again for listening. Go to our iTunes page, check it out, check out the previous episodes, give us a nice review, that would be awesome. Really appreciate if you could do that for us. We really appreciate you just for being here and listening. Thank you so much. God bless you, and we'll see you on the next episode of The Rising Generation.